Alrighty. Everybody settle down. Just kidding. I'm going to invite, if you didn't know, Tina Rounds is with us this morning. She is the executive director of Beds. I'm going to invite her up. And really, what we have for you this morning is not a long presentation by any means, but there will be time for questions. We're going to be putting up a very small version of the plans on the screen. I'll point to a couple things. I'll get up there and point to them. But the full scale drawings, those plans that are submitted, they've already been submitted to the village, but those copies out there, don't take those because those are going to go to the village as well. So, yeah. Tina, join me. Apologize if there's a pop when I do this. You want to check that?
Good morning. I can do that.
Is it on?
Good morning.
Oh, there you go. Great.
Okay.
So you can put up that first slide. So do you want to answer that?
Okay, I can answer.
Yeah.
I think I can answer this. First, I just want to say thanks for having me and for your contemplation in this decision. I appreciate your thoughts, your commitment, and your interest in continuing with us. I deeply appreciate that. I know it hasn't been easy for the church. You may have passed a neighbor in the community who was upset with you because of this decision, and I do know how that feels. It's not a new feeling for me, and I know sometimes makes you think differently about those folks that were once friends and neighbors, and it sometimes creates a separation. So I do understand, and I appreciate your willingness to be a part of something like that, because it's not easy. So what is happening with Beds? The same thing that's happening in the world is happening with Beds. COVID-19 took us on like a storm. So, and really changed the underlying service model and service delivery for our homeless ministry. So for 30 years, we were working, exclusively with churches who opened up their fellowship halls so that we might serve folks in a common mission. The church side is to open the doors of Christian hospitality. Our side is to get the social workers busy, moving them through the opportunities that they might have next. And it's been a beautiful relationship. COVID-19, in the early time of COVID-19, around March, we consolidated to a fixed site location. We opened up 2 churches that we hijacked their building, I like to say. And we took on, a closed, facility. So while we were all hunkered out at home, we allowed people to hunker down in 2 different church locations, one in Oak Lawn and one in Brookfield. And that worked really well until the state opened up. And so then we received some funding to put people in motels. So we have been housing people in motels since last June. And at our highest point, we had 121 motel rooms at 5 different motel locations. I often say it's not the top 10 best hotels in the state of Illinois, but it's places where our folks could otherwise afford, and they were willing to work with us. We've seen a lot of loneliness. We've actually had more people, unfortunately, pass away from overdose than we have from COVID. And we directly attribute that to, the underlying mental health conditions, the experience of loneliness, and the lack of community that the faith communities brought to their lives. Those small incidents of, how are you? Tell me about what happened in your life, kind of conversations that made the difference. We believe strongly in that. So anyway, there's been a lot of federal funding that has come through for organizations like ours. We're at the front line of providing financial assistance. We will have facilitated about $1 million of financial assistance to people who are at risk of homelessness, so those that are mortgage insecure, who are being evicted. We're facilitating that we're one of the partners in the southwest suburbs, so if you know of anybody who is behind on rent, we can help facilitate state, county, and federal funding. So we've been doing that. In terms of our homeless ministry, we have been working with these motels. We're consolidating to a few motels, but taking a larger presence. Up until about 2 weeks ago, we were planning to do rotating shelter at churches this fall, but we had to stop those efforts. And the reason why we stopped that effort in uncertainty with the Delta variant and some additional variants that are already present in the United States, and our inability to, come to a decision about vaccinations, mandatory vaccinations with the clients, with the volunteers, and just putting in those measures within a congregate space. So we decided we're going to continue with motels for this upcoming winter, up until we determine that. We've also been privileged to have some funding that comes our way with these federal dollars. So we have 3 exciting opportunities happening. One opportunity is that we bought a building in Summit, and we have a medical respite shelter planned, which will have a clinic on site and partnerships with medical facilities. It's at 63rd and Archer, and so that's going to come on queue around March. We have rented apartments in Bed's name throughout southwest suburban Cook County, and we have put families there, and we're in the process of purchasing some of those apartments. So those will be our family shelter, and we have a few other things. We're looking at transition age youth facility in Evergreen Park as well, where we would put pregnant and parenting transition age youth. So those interventions were things that we were able to secure funding for and take care of about 60% of our overall population. Between 60 and 65% are medically vulnerable, transition age youth or families. And so our hope is that we can move forward with the church-based ministry and replace what we're doing with the hotels, because it's not sustainable and it's on short-term funding, and we know it's not something that helps our people. It actually makes things worse in many ways. So we're hoping to do that at the earliest would be this next summer, but could potentially will be next fall. We believe it might look a little different because some of our church partners have consolidated in the Catholic Church, have consolidated and are no longer available. Some churches are not weathering the storm of COVID-19 well. And so we believe we'll have to have transportation, and it will be a regional-based shelter system. And we believe it will be potentially a smaller footprint of people, so not as many, because some of them will be in those other interventions. But so many things are contingent upon all the decisions that legislators make and what is happening with the economy. So we could have a higher population of people based on economic condition, or there could be other rental assistance available, and we could have less. But our hope and our plan is that we would start those systems again in 2022. And the only other scenario we talk through is that if the shelter, if the variants are going down and the numbers are looking better, and the weather is bad, we're Chicago, we would be looking at more of a pop-up locations throughout our system. We would be seeking churches to do a pop-up location. And that would mean for a particular week period, we would have shelter with those people that were unable to be funded in the motels. So that's our plan. That's what's going on with beds. That's what's happening today, and that's what our plan is for the future. I know you're making some financial decisions, and I know you've got to do what's best for your church, but we're hoping to partner with you in the future. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to give you, details about the organization or what our plans and opportunities are.
Thank you, Tina. Just from so that's from bedside. I wanted to give some context of what's happening on our side, because the last time we spoke to you was before COVID about beds specifically. And we've had an update, an email update. Hey, bud. We've had an email update, but we have not really had a kind of a definition of what's happened in the last basically 18 months with Hope. And Tina, if I say anything in the next 2 slides that's wrong, just raise your hand, because I'm operating somewhat off of memory. But basically, the story is that at a certain point, obviously 2 years ago, we had a disagreement with the village where we tried to start our shelter with them a pretty long time in advance, and they didn't really want to negotiate with us, or I don't know the full situation, but what eventually happened was that because we had not received any contact from the village stating that we couldn't open a shelter, we opened a shelter. There was backlash. Obviously, massive backlash revolved me dressing up in a suit and going down to the Daily Center for a day or two. It involved going to a meeting at the Orland Park Township, or not the Orland Park Township, Orland Park Village Hall, where a group of essentially protesters advocated and lobbied for the village to settle their suit with us and to allow us to open the shelter. There was some pushback there, but eventually, truthfully, the pressure that was put on from not just us, but from our wider community of people who supported the Beds Shelter here at Hope, and through your faithfulness, the people of Hope, the village settled with us, essentially giving us free access to do this indefinitely. One of their conditions of this access was some building renovations. The initial building renovations would have involved moving concrete walls and things like that they initially proposed to us, and were really not a good faith effort deemed by us, even deemed by them, were not a good faith effort. Yeah, Mom wants you, so go. Of negotiating with us to open the shelter. They seemed like a natural impediment intentionally leveraged to prevent any homeless shelter from opening. So we were able to negotiate with them with several lawyers who all donated their time, including lawyers who actually go to Hope as members, but lawyers in the outside community who donated their time. Eventually, we were able to go before the zoning board. Before COVID became a crisis in Chicagoland, the zoning board was quite different than what we had faced with the trustees. The zoning board was extremely supportive. They expedited the process to get us the proper zoning to do this. And eventually, on the very meeting when the topic of agenda was COVID-19, it was the first socially distant meeting in March, the trustees, in a unanimous kind of under-the-radar quiet motion, passed the settlement agreement that we're talking about today. And so the settlement agreement did require some renovations, but specifically no structural renovations, in an effort to keep this low cost for the church and to keep the shelter in Orland. Why this matters, why we're doing the renovations and not simply saying, well, another church can do it that could make the same renovations. Why we're doing this is because our shelter is not just about us. Yes, it's about caring for the poor. Yes, it's about the specific clients in our area. But it's also about the fact that Orland Park had never had, or had for a span of, I think, 3 weeks in like the 70s or something like that, they had a shelter that no one had ever attended. We are effectively the first shelter in Orland Park history. And the way that the homeless shelters are set up, this is where I might need you to correct me, each shelter system has a catch basin area, which means that anyone who is found to be homeless in that municipality is kind of allocated to a specific organization, whether it be PADS or BEDS or another organization like this. Because Orland Park had never had a shelter, Orland Park had no catch basin. So literally it was up to the whims of whoever found this person on the street to call around to an organization. And usually what happened, what has been admitted to me, is what would happen is that they would drive them to the border of Orland Park and they'd let them out of the car. And they'd say, get in touch with an officer at the next municipality over, because now you're in their municipality and you can find somebody. Because we have no ability to bus you anywhere, to take you anywhere, because there is no shelter in Orland. So by bringing a shelter to Orland, we don't only house people on Tuesday night, we house anyone who is found to be homeless, whose last known address was in Orland Park, at the rest of the bed system, effectively extending the bed system south quite significantly. So we've widened the area where people can be serviced by a homeless shelter. The second thing is that there has been a mounting effort by many municipalities, Orland is not unique, to prevent or make difficult homeless shelters opening and or operating in their municipality. There's a lot of reasons for this, but generally it's just negative stigma. We don't want homeless people wandering around our streets, so therefore we don't want a homeless shelter that might potentially attract these people who are undesirable, right? And so there's been several cases around the state of Illinois and outside of Illinois where municipalities have tried to put forward impediments to try and stop homeless shelters from being able to operate, whether it's changing their zoning structure, changing their sprinkler requirements, not allowing them to be grandfathered into certain church religious exemptions for buildings, all these things to try and effectively shut down shelters and prevent them from opening in the future. Orland's effort was almost second to none with us. The lawyers that we contacted that have run other cases were like, in comparison to the other cases, this is like they've thrown everything at you initially, right off the bat. And so, if you fold, effectively what you're doing is you're setting a precedent for all municipalities that if they use the same playbook, they can get shelters out as well. So Orland's shelter, our shelter, became really important for two reasons beyond what it does for our population here. It became a precedent setting that churches and organizations like ours will not back down under political pressure to serve the most vulnerable members of our society, which, by the way, the federal government and the state government has set up as an essential service for religious organizations like churches to do. And number two, it extends Bed's catch basin area significantly south, allowing Beds to be a much larger organization as far as gathering people who are found, but also increases their funding structure where all of a sudden, if you donate to homeless ministry in Orland Park, now you're donating to Beds. You're not donating to a national organization, you're donating to a specific local organization, or at least that's the hope. So a lot of reasons why we're doing this, but at the core of it, it's because we've made a commitment. The leadership team and the congregation made a commitment when we decided to host Beds and when we decided to sign that settlement agreement with the village to make these changes, that we would do these things. Now, when we signed that agreement, it was a long time ago, it was 18 months ago. And the village has been very accommodating to us to allow us to extend this time because we haven't been hosting shelter. And they're going to continue to be accommodating to us because this has now become a positive for their building department to have a shelter like ours. They've seen the light in that, hey, this is good for our police department to have somewhere to bring people. This is good for our fire department to know who their partners are. This is good for our municipality to have somewhere for homeless people to go because they do exist in our midst. And so we're making the renovations because of the settlement agreement. And what are those renovations? Effectively, they're all happening right below where we are right now. There's a couple little other things, like some exterior lighting, but mostly they're happening right below you right now, which was the former fellowship hall of this building before we added the wing. And so there are certain structural things in the basement. I said there was going to be nothing structural, but there are certain drywall, like adding additional drywall that's required to make the fire prevention or the fire stop better in those areas, which are required for people to sleep in those areas. And the majority of these things, I'll just say right up front, are things that are good for our building, regardless of whether we have beds. That's just truth. Exterior lighting that's battery backup operated is good if we're having a church lock-in. It's good if we're having the soup supper and we're here after dark and there's people using our kitchen and start a fire. We want that exterior lighting. It's good for our any candlelight service or anything that we do at night. It's not just for people who are sleeping here. This exterior lighting is something that our building should have. We have not had to have it because we're a church and we get grandfathered into all these things because of separation of church and state. But this is a good thing for us. having larger numbers on our door. You wouldn't believe how many people come to me and go, I just didn't know where your building was because you have 2.5-inch numbers on your door. Well, the village requires 6-inch numbers. Of course, they've never come after us for it because we're a church, and who cares? Well, now it matters to them so that they know where the homeless shelter is. It's clearly identifiable. That's a couple dollars, but it's on these plans that you're going to see up here. And then adding a disability ADA accessible bathroom in the basement. That seems kind of silly. A lot of this stuff is related to ADA accessibility. It seems kind of silly because we don't have a way for people who are disabled to get into the basement right now. But ultimately, our long-term vision casting as a church ought to be, and I'll say this unequivocally, to have our full building be accessible to anyone who comes into our building, period. It is not church appropriate for us to show favoritism to non-disabled individuals with our basement. If someone comes with a child who's disabled, who's not an adult child, and has a wheelchair, right now we have no way for them to attend any sort of youth activities that we might do in the basement. This is something that we should do. And our ability to add this bathroom now with a shower and make it ADA accessible means that when we eventually do install a lift of some kind, then the basement automatically becomes ADA accessible. You don't have to blow out walls anymore on our current bathrooms to make those accessible. You just have your accessible bathroom already. So here are the plans. I'll just point out a couple things really, really quickly, and then I'll tell you kind of the good news. This is where the bathroom will go, right here. If you can't see it, it's larger up there in the corner. But this is in what we have the storage room downstairs. Many of you have never been in the basement. That's okay. So I'm just talking and you're not listening, and that's fine. But there's going to be a bathroom. This is where our current bathrooms are, right here. So it's very close to our current bathrooms. It requires adding a door and putting up some what they call green rock, which is water resistant drywall. Yeah, Dale. Yes. Yep. So when you come down the stairs and you're going into, our building is a gigantic L. When you're in the corner of the L, right now there is our storage room. That's the primary place where storage is in our building today. It's where all of our loving storage is. It's where all of our bed storage is. Inside that building, inside that room, there will be a bathroom. So you will go. You won't have to go into the room. You can come in through the hallway. But that bathroom will have one toilet, one sink. These are not two toilets, Scott. These are one toilet, one sink, and a shower. That's all that will be in that room. And you can see there's a bunch of, if you draw the expanded out here version up here, there's a bunch of lines and stuff that show how far apart everything is so that a person could navigate that in a wheelchair, or who has other mobility issues, who has a walker or anything like that. So we are adding an ADA accessible bathroom, which also, again, we don't currently house people who are ADA because we don't have a way of getting them up and down in the basement. They're currently bused to another location. But if we ever did, this would be helpful, or this would be necessary. All of our windows on that exterior wall, again, it's this wall right here. If you extend it down, those are quite small. Back in the day when there were not rooms down there, remember all those walls up in the basement, all of those individual rooms, those are all just, non-load bearing walls. Those are just put up as partitions, essentially. Those windows now don't necessarily have enough ventilation capacity to have people sleeping down there. And so what it means is it just is not super great to have those down there. Now, you guys know that we have a Zumba class now that meets on Wednesdays in the basement. We've had a workout class that has been meeting basically throughout COVID in the basement in one of those rooms that has poor ventilation. What we're going to do, as required by the settlement agreement that we signed, is not make those windows bigger. That's what they wanted us to do initially, which would have been many thousands of dollars in concrete costs and restructuring the building, but just add exhaust units that can push out air from that area. All of those partition walls end at the ceiling. Those have to be brought all the way up to the top, to the base plate of the sanctuary. The reason for that is that when fire is coming, fire likes to go up, and so if there's no wall above, it's like it's all one room. You want to have different rooms so that the fire, if there is potential fire, which of course all of this we never want this to be relevant to us because we don't want to have a fire. We have to bring those walls up. For all of our corridors, you can see here, this is just the corridor of our, where the walkway meets those rooms. We have to add additional drywall because the drywall that is up there right now is not fire-rated drywall. We need to add fire-rated drywall to those areas. Like I said, we have on all of the exits, we have exterior lighting now. Obviously the new bathroom, and then the last thing, there's a couple other minor things like numbers, things like adding tamper-resistant outlets. For those who know what a tamper-resistant outlet is, it's just arc protected. It means that somebody sticks a fork in the outlet, they won't die. Stuff like that. We have a lot of small things like that, and then the last major thing is interconnected smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms. What they mean by interconnected is that currently, you might say, well, don't we have smoke alarms? The answer is actually only in this room. This is the only room in our building that currently has smoke alarms. What we have is fire alarms. Fire alarms are different than smoke alarms in that fire alarms operate by heat, which means that the fire has to be really going before the alarm goes off. And I think very fittingly, the judge and us agreed with the village in their assessment that best practices would be a smoke alarm that would go off far before a fire alarm would, so that people can evacuate the building before there are actual physical flames. Even if there's significant amount of smoke, then they can evacuate. What interconnected means is that if one smoke alarm goes off, all of the smoke alarms go off. If one carbon monoxide alarm goes off, all of them go off. Again, these are just standard things that we probably should be doing anyway. So that's the total renovation here. It's sheetrock going up on the walls where there already is sheetrock, so it's going to require people to mud and tape that, contractors and volunteers. It's going to require interconnected smoke alarms, like I said, and obviously adding a ADA accessible bathroom in the basement is the big one. Here's the big question that all of you guys want to know is how much is this going to cost? And I want to state right now, as a person who's flipped 3 houses, the number that I'm going to tell you right now is absurdly low, like laughably low. This should cost us well over $50,000 to do this work. It should. That would include permit fees from the village. That would include the structural designs from the architect, because we had to have an architect draw out all of these plans. That would include lawyer fees for zoning and the permitting process. That would include all of the materials that are required for this job. Obviously, we have vent fans going in, toilet. There's one more thing we have to fix. If you guys know, the sinks in the basement don't put out hot water. Well, they're asking us to have our sinks actually work. Really brutal of them to make us do that. Stuff like, it requires several sinks, like 5 sinks total. We may decide at some point to put in a better hot water heater, because our hot water heater is about to go out right now, and it's very small if we're having a shower. As any of you know who live with teenagers, it goes quick. You probably want one that is a ductless, tankless hot water heater that can provide that. That will also save us money in the long run as far as our energy costs and things like that. All of that stuff combined is supposed to cost us $15,000. The reason that that's supposed to cost us $15,000, that's the number that our contractor has given us, is because all of our lawyer fees were pro bono. All of our permit fees were covered as a condition of the settlement agreement. Those could have easily been $5,000. All of our labor and contractor work is pro bono. Our architect was pro bono and did this out of the goodness of his heart. This means that our total investment, we've already spent about $1,000 of upgrading one of our sprinkler things that we needed to do, by the way, and the village only found because we let them in about the homeless shelter, but it was a problem with our building, not with the homeless shelter. In fact, it services an area of the building that is not related to the homeless shelter as of yet. Other than that $1,000 that we already spent on that 2 years ago, when that all happened, the total cost of this is $15,000 because everything's being donated, everything. Even some of the conduit and copper piping is being pulled off of other jobs of churches and nonprofits that are donating any scrap that they have. And the contracting is being done by Operation Nehemiah, who for free, or for the cost of the materials, brings in groups of people, including Dave Gilmore, who's a member of Hope. He works with them. That's how we got in touch with them, to do these types of renovations so that churches can stay open. So we're adding essentially $60,000 to $70,000 of added value to our church at $15,000 of cost, of which we already have $4,000 raised from beds. And you'll notice that we've never done a beds fundraiser. Never. The reason that we have $4,000 raised, or we actually used to have $5,000, we spent $1,000 on our sprinklers, is because people just gave us money when we started the shelter. We didn't ask them for it, they just gave it to us. And so we're very confident in our ability to fundraise for potentially the rest of this $11,000. Additionally, Beds has had great success in the past of helping churches fundraise by going to their people who are people who donate on behalf of Beds, who might live in Orland Park or live in a municipality close by, who want to service this ministry. I'm not saying that this is what we'll get, but they have fundraised to add a sprinkler system during a similar effort by a different municipality to shut down a shelter because they didn't have a sprinkler system. They fundraised for that church like $50-something thousand so that that church could be able to put in a sprinkler system. So effectively, what all of this means for you this morning, the members who are actually going to be voting on this and those who are just interested in listening, is that we have a motion that says that we'll allocate up to $11,000 of our memorial funds to the Beds Fund for renovations to better serve our Beds ministry. Of that $11,000, potentially up to $11,000. So if we'll first exhaust our Beds funds, our $4,000 of Beds funds, then we will begin to dig into the memorial funds until the project is complete, up to $11,000. Whatever we do not use will not be allocated to the Beds Fund. It will stay in the memorial fund. And those memorial fund monies that we allocate, we can then, if we wind up raising this money in collaboration with Beds, through a fundraiser that we do, through emails that we send to donors who have donated in the past and might have resources to donate now, we can choose to backfill up to the amount that we allocated out of the memorial fund back into the memorial fund. So in effect, we're writing ourselves a loan. Whether we want to, at the point in which we get donations in, backfill our memorial fund, whatever we've used, or whether we choose at that point as a congregation to put that money towards something else and use our memorial fund for this project and just leave it as, hey, we used it and this is a good use for it, is up to us later. But it's not that we're not going to fundraise, it's that we're coming forward with it. And the reason that we didn't fundraise before this project is that everything has happened as quickly as possible on this project. It might not feel like it because it's taken 18 months. But literally, the day that we got the plans was the day that we sent the plans to the contractor. The same week that they got the plans, they met with me at the church at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning to go over everything that needed to be done. That's the same week that we sent the permits to the village. They take a long time with stuff, they come back with it. They're still in the permitting process. So we have literally not had these designs until basically right now. And because we haven't had these designs until the summer, we didn't feel comfortable. I'll say I did not feel comfortable going and asking people to donate towards a cause where they go, okay, well, what are you going to be doing? And I go, I don't know, we don't have plans yet. I wanted to see this renovation, have us as a congregation affirm that we are responsible for this renovation, and if other people want to help us, great. Jim? What? Let's vote. Okay, I love it. So that's everything. Do people have questions? If anybody's wondering, we have over $50,000 in memorial funds right now, just FYI, and more coming. Okay, great. Well, there is no need for a second because this motion was forwarded by the board. The motion is as follows. Hope will allocate up to $11,000 of memorial funds to the Beds Fund for renovations to serve our Beds ministries. I don't think we need to do a... Is anybody, as an LT member I can offer, does anyone object to a vote by voice? Great. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed? Wonderful. Passes. Great. We can go to our contractors. I'm sorry that I wasted half an hour of your time for something you're going to vote for anyway, but now you know. Now you know. So when you see this stuff happen, when you get emails about a fundraiser that we do, when you get emails about, hey, we need people to come and paint walls or put up drywall or whatever, now you know what that is. Now you know what we're going to be doing with that. Now you know why it's important. Tell your friends. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Thank you.